Hey y'all, it's Ryan. I have really started to love the kawaii style whenever drawing or doodling animals. I think the proportions and the big, cute eyes are just adorable. So in today's video, we are going to draw this kawaii styled owl. So grab your drawing tools and let's get to it. So the canvas for our owl today is going to be different than canvases I've used in the past. So this canvas size, I just did my screen size because it allows me to have a lot more layers. I have maximum 134 on this canvas, and I use a lot of layers on this drawing. So I'm going to turn off all of my layers, set my background to white so that we can get started on our owl. So for our owl sketch, there are a couple of things that I want to do first before I start laying down my idea. So one is I'm going to come into my actions under canvas and turn on drawing guide. If you do not have the vertical drawing guide set up already, click edit drawing guide. Make sure it's set on symmetry, click options, and says vertical. And then click done. In my layers, I'm going to tap the plus sign to bring up a new layer. I'm going to click this layer and click drawing assist. So that way, whatever I draw on one side of my canvas will be done on the other side for me. Also going to come into my actions and turn on my reference picture. So if your image didn't pop up, you're going to click import and then select a reference image from your camera roll. I'm using this just to have a really good idea of the size that I made proportion wise and the colors whenever we start coloring in our outline and go back in and add those colors to it. So my brush that I like to use for my sketching is the 6B pencil, which can be found in the sketching brush library. Make sure I am on that drawing assisted layer. And because it's drawing assist, again, I don't have to worry about doing the whole thing. It'll take care of that for me. The owl that I'm drawing is that very kawaii kind of style with the proportions and the nice big round eyes. So I want to keep that in mind whenever I'm laying down my outline or my sketch. So I'm going to start in the center of my canvas where that line is. I'm going to draw the outline of where his eyes will be. And this is a very rough outline. That's why I'm not being too precise with it. I'll go back over and do the outline, a thick line work kind of outline after this. So there's where his face is right here. And then I also have this piece connecting kind of the back of his head. So I'm going to start in the middle and just draw that arch kind of over. And then he has feathers that kind of look like horns out to the side. I'm gonna make them rounded. Here we go. And then again, the proportion, I'm going to do the body outline first, and then I'll add wings on top of that, just to make sure that I get the proportions that I like in my sketch. So starting kind of in the middle of his eye, I'm going to go down, and then I'm going to bring this around to make kind of just a cute, pudgy little body on this owl. And then this area right here, this secondary feather color, I'm going to start where his head meets his body over here on the side. I'm just going to draw almost like a shield down. And then his little feet, put one right there. And for this, I'm just drawing ovals and I'm holding so that they snap. And then lastly, if you want to add like the tail to the owl, I'm going to start on the outside of where I just drew my talons or their feet. I'm going to draw down, curve it around until it meets in the center. So there is a rough idea of just, again, the outline of my owl. I'm going to come in to add his beak and his eyes. So first his eyes, they're going to be nice big circles. And then his beak is going to sit right in this area. So it kind of hangs over where the bottom of his face connects. So I'm going to draw just like a blob kind of out to the side, just to give it that extra little detail. And then I'm going to draw in and up for the shape of his beak for the top, and then in and down so that it comes to a point at the bottom. And there's his beak. I'm going to draw nice big circles for the eyes, for his irises. This is where his iris will be. And then on the eye, I like adding this cute little detail out to the side. I don't know if it's more of like a eyelash for the owl or if it's just cute, but I like adding that. That's not the right spot. Let's take it out to about halfway down. Okay, that looks a lot better. Okay, so there's my owl. And I know I'm going to come in and add this secondary feather to the owl's face. And now that I have my eyes and my beak in place, I could go ahead and just kind of sketch out where that would be. And I am going to follow the original shape of his eyes, but this is going to connect here where his beak is, like the middle of his beak is. Again, this is just a rough sketch, so it's okay that it's not perfect. Okay. So there is our owl. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to add a new layer on top of this, and we're going to work on cleaning up this sketch with clean lines so that then we can come back in and add color to it. So for my outline, I'm going to turn off my drawing guide. I'm going to keep my reference on for now. In my layers, I'm going to add a new layer, come into my sketch that I just did, click the N. I'm going to change this up to multiply so it's nice and dark because I am going to lower the opacity just so I can barely see it. In my new layer, I'm going to come back in with my Monoline brush, set to black, again, just so I can get that clean outline of my owl. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the face here. I'm going to set that brush size down to 12. I'm going to start with my face here, go around, try that again. And really, this is me picking where I want my lines, what lines I want to use from my sketch for my final owl right here. Go. This will also give me a chance to add in the wings that I want to add over his body as well. Okay, so now that I have a really good clean outline, I'm going to turn my canvas around so that I can add in where I want his wings to sit or lay on top of where his body is right here. So for his wings, I'm going to draw just an arch down. I'm going to hold so it snaps to for me. For this, actually, let me turn on my assisted drawing guide again. Okay. So draw from where his head meets his body here. I'm going to draw just a little bit wider than what I have his body set at. Again, hold so it snaps for me. And then his wing, I'm going to do an S shape. So it'll come out and then come back in and meet at the top. There we go. I'm going to erase where his body, that line is for his body, where his wing is going to be covering it, just so it's clean and easy for me to see where that is whenever I'm drawing. Okay, so now I have my nice clean outline done. I'm going to start adding color to my owl, and then we'll work on adding in the trees and the background. For adding color to our owl, I'm going to do a few things first. So I'm going to come back into my actions and turn off my drawing guide. In my layers, I can turn off my owl sketch. And then in this new layer, in this outline, I'm going to do the same steps that I did with this one. When I wanted to make the outline, I'm going to click the N. I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply so it's nice and dark. And then I'm going to turn my opacity down. I'm going to build the color layers in between my outline and my sketch layer, so that way I can still clearly see my outline, but then I can also see all of the colors that I'm doing here. I'm building underneath it. So the color swatch that I'm going to start with is this. It's a middle tan color, so I have it set in orange, and it's a tan, kind of a dull tan. And then in my brushes, I'm going to use my Monoline brush because I'm actually going to go in and add texture at the very end of this drawing. So coming back in with my monoline, I'm going to start with his face first. Okay, I'm going to hold so it snaps too. And hold again. Now I'm going to use the color drop, the fill feature. So I want to make sure that this shape is closed, and I'm going to drag that color into the middle of it and make sure that it is completely filled in. Okay. Next, I'm going to add a new layer underneath his eyes. I'm going to, because I'm using the same color for the bulk of his body down here, I'm going to draw his body shape. And again, because I want to use that color fill, I'm going to make sure that this is closed. So then I can drag and fill in that body color. In between these two layers is where I'm going to add that secondary color, because I want it to sit behind his face but on top of his body. And then in my color palette, this is going to be this middle light tan. Okay. And then again, I'm just going to make sure that it's closed so I can color fill. Okay. I'm also going to use the same color up here at the top for the top of his head and then his feathers out to the side. I'm going to stick on this one layer. I'm not going to create a new one. And I'm just going to add in those features to my drawing. And then I can connect these two in the back to make sure they are closed. And then I need to connect them elsewhere, right there. There. So now I should be able to fill it. Okay. And then lastly is his tail. Now his tail is going to sit behind his body, so I do need a new layer for that one. Come down to my sketch layer, click the plus sign to add a new layer. And add in that tail. And then same steps. Make sure that it's closed so I can color fill. Now I'm going to add his wings, and that's going to sit on top of both his body and this layer right here for that secondary feather color. So I'm going to click the plus sign there. For his wings, I did make them this darker colored brown. Let's go even darker. So in my color palette, it's the very last, it's really hard to see because the color of my palette is gray. So it's right here in the very last slot for the colors. make sure these shapes are closed so that I can drag that color fill in. Okay. Next, I'm going to add in his beak and the secondary color on his face. So I'm going to come up to my face layer, add a new layer. I'm going to stick with the same brown that I just did for his feathers. I'm going to start by adding his beak, just so I have a good idea of where that line is going to stop. I'm actually going to reshape that beak a little bit, just so it matches a little more with what I have in my original. There we go. So I made it a little lower. I didn't bring it the top up as high. And then I brought in, I have more of a line out here on the side. Then I'm going to color fill. And there's his beak. So now I need to add a layer in between the beak and my face, so I can add that secondary color. And it is the same color that I've been using on the rest of his body. So I'm just going to hold to bring in my color, the eyedropper, to select that color. I'm gonna hold that so it makes that nice shape for me. Again, right there. I am going to come in and turn off the beak so that I can ensure that this is closed so that when I do the color drop, it fills it in for me. There we go. So now we have a good base for, I'm going to move that beak down a little bit actually. There we go, that's better. So now we have a good base as far as our owl and the color goes. So now I'm gonna start working on adding in those details, like his eyes and the color, and then adding in the feather kind of look as well. So in my layers, first, I'm going to come in and create a new layer to add in his feet down here at the bottom. So I'm going to turn my outline back on. His feet need to sit on top of his body. So I'm going to find that body layer, click the plus sign. Again, I'm using that dark brown that I used on his wings and his beak. So I'm going to hold until my color drop comes up to select that color. And then I'm going to drag into one, and I'm going to click the continue filling so it switches to color drop, and then I can just drop that color in to the rest. So I'm going to start with the eyes. So on top of my really light layer, I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to switch back to black for the outline. Draw a nice big circle. Hold so that it snaps to for me. Okay. And then I'm actually going to add the irises onto a different layer because I'm going to add a clipping mask specifically on this layer, and then I'm going to add color here. So before I do that, I'm going to add in that little detail off to the side. Okay, so on top of my eye layer, click the plus sign. Make a circle. And then fill. Do the same thing on this side. Now I'm going to come in, add a new layer, tap it, and select clipping mask. I'm going to come in to change it to white, and I'm just going to add that reflection going on in his eyes. So start off of it because, again, it's a clipping mask just on his irises, and just draw a U shape. And then a little circle underneath it. Same on the other side. And now I have that cute little reflection going on. I'm going to add some color to his eye because this is a plain kind of owl. So in my color palette, I'm going to select this really pretty teal. You can change it to whatever color you want. I'm going to come back to my eye layer, the outline, and I'm just going to drag that color in on both sides. So now I have a little pop of color on my owl.
Next, I'm going to work on his little beak and add
this highlight on his beak. In my layers, I'm going to get that beak layer, click the plus sign, tap it to make it a clipping mask, and then I'm going to set it to an extremely light colored yellow. And then in my brushes, I'm going to use this soft brush. I'm going to turn it down to about 3. And I'm just going to lightly, let me turn that opacity down to 50. I'm just going to lightly follow the shape of that beak to add that highlight to it. Okay. Next, I'm going to start adding in these feathers up at the top. So in my layer that has the top of his head and the feathers out to the side, add a new layer, make it a clipping mask, change my brush back to Monoline, and I'm going to use the same brown that I used on his feet and wings and his beak to create the kind of different feather look going out and off to the side. So I'm going to start in the middle and end. I'm going to make almost an S shape out to the side on both sides here. Okay. Now I'm going to come in and add in my dot pattern that I have. And you can space these out a lot more if you would like. I'm just going into there we go. So now I see the little feathers that would be up at the top of his head. Since all of this is on the same layer, I'm going to go ahead and come into right here in the middle of his body and add in that detail of I am adding in a set of layers, that the layer of feathers on his body right here. So again, this is same clipping mask. So I'm going to start off and bring it in. Oh, I have the eraser on. Okay, there we go. There we go. So I'm just doing a really easy swoop along that top part of the feathers right there. Now I'm going to come in and add what looks like teardrops, really, again, just to show different layers of feathers. Okay. Next, I'm going to change my pencil. I'm going to change my pen to the 6B pencil so I get that textured look. And I'm going to start adding in my feather details into my other layers on his face. So coming into this light layer, add a plus sign, add a layer selected as a clipping mask. Come into my brush library and select my 6B pencil. And then I'm going to color drop onto his body color. And I'm going to just add tick marks around his eyes just to give it a little bit of texture to it. And I am going in a pattern, because typically they have more of a pattern in their feathers. And again, just adding in that texture to show kind of where feathers would be on this guy's face. I'm not pushing super hard on my pencil because I don't want it to be a very thick line. I want it to be, again, just to add that texture to it and just be visible. Going to do the same on his wings and then add feathers to his body. So find my wing layer, add a new one, make it a clipping mask. For this, I'm going to keep it on the dark color that I have here. And I'm just going to, again, do the same thing. Adding in just the texture to his wings. Okay. Next, I'm going to add in those feathers to his body. So finding that body layer, plus sign, make it a clipping mask. And for this, I'm going to color drop the dark brown. I'm going to keep it on 6B pencil, and I am just going to, like I did here with the swoops, to build in, show like different layers of feathers. I'm going to do that across his body. So I'm going to start off of the colors so that way it just shows more of a natural, and I'm just going to follow straight across. And then I'm going to come in and add a few down here. And there I have his feathers. The last detail that I'm going to add is going to be to his face. I'm going to add that blush. So on top of both of my layers here, I'm not going to add it as a clipping mask. I'm going to do its own layer because I need it to cover both the light and kind of a little bit on the dark color of his face. So I'm going to come into my color wheel, change it to pink, and move it way up so that it's this light blush. It's not super bright, but it's a very subtle pink. I'm going to change my brush to this Tamar brush, which can be found in your painting brush set. I like just the look. It's a painting brush, so it gives it a different texture to it. I'm going to turn that opacity down to about 50. I still have it set brush-wise, the size, I have it on about 3. And very lightly and loosely, I'm just going to draw that kind of blush circle onto his face. Okay. In my layers, I'm going to turn off my outline layer. So now I have a very clean idea of where everything is sitting and how it's looking. And there is our owl. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and then swipe to click on my top layer, swipe to the right on all of the other layers dealing with my owl, and I'm going to group them together. So that way I can select all and move all at the same time, because I am going to now work on the background and the tree. So I want to be able to move my owl and resize if needed to better fit on the tree that I draw. For my background layer, I am going to turn off my owl, and I'm going to move my reference picture over to my right because I know I want my tree going all the way, the full height of my canvas over here on the side. And then I'm going to stretch it out to my right. So in my colors, I'm going to select this lighter brown because it's going to be in the very front of my picture where my owl is. And then for this, I'm going to go back to my 6B pencil. And this is a loose, whoops, I'm gonna add a new layer, grab it, drag it underneath my owl because my owl is going to be sitting on top of my tree. Now I can start drawing the tree. So it is a loose, just kind of squiggle line going down the canvas. Okay. And then I'm going to have my main branch where my owl is going to sit come off to the right. So I'm going to grab where I have my tree here. I'm going to come down and make kind of a swoop. And then, again, very loose, just wavy line off to the side. For the bottom of that branch, I'm going to come up, just like I came down on this. I'm going to come back up and meet. Take that out to the side. I'm going to add a secondary branch up at the top. Same kind of steps. And then finish that branch off. And you could even add a secondary smaller branch coming off of this one if you wanted. There we go. And then I'm going to drag and color fill in my branches and my tree. Okay. So because I used the pencil, I do have this line where you can tell where I added different areas or different sections of the tree. So I'm just going to come back in and color back over that so you can't see that division of it. Okay, so there I have my tree. I am going to add some shadows and highlights to it because the idea that I had when drawing this owl was that it's nighttime and the moon, the light from the moon is kind of filtering through all of the trees that are in there. So you will have some highlights and shadows on the main tree up front that you'll see. So in my layers, I'm gonna click the plus sign to add a new layer, make it a clipping mask, and then I'm gonna change my blend mode to screen. So it's the same brown that I'm using. I'm gonna change my pencil to soft brush. I'm gonna bump up the size to about 7. And I'm just going to lightly color in on the outside. You can see the different colors. So because I have the blending mode set on screen, it's going to be lighter. And I'm going to add kind of where those highlights would be from the moonlight hitting this tree. I'm also going to add my shadows. So new layer, clipping mask. Instead of screen, I'm going to change this to multiply, still on the same brown color, still using my soft brush, but now it darkens that color for me and it gives it a nice shadow look on my tree. I'll lower the opacity a little bit more and add some more shadows just to give it a more interesting look. And they're not going to be all the same, so some are going to be heavier shadows in some areas. So like right here, I have it, it's a lot darker versus farther up the tree. Okay. So now I have my first tree done. So the next tree that I'm going to work on is going to be, it's the second closest tree, or second furthest tree, I guess you could say. So I'm actually just going to duplicate this base layer right here. So swipe to the left and click duplicate. And then I'm going to select that bottom layer. I'm going to click flip horizontal. I'm going to resize this tree down. And because I'm using the bottom layer, it's already behind my other tree. And then in my color palette, I'm going to select this. It's a middle dark brown. So if I click on all the other browns, you'll see that it moves just slightly. It's because it's not as far away, it's not going to be completely black, but it's not going to be this lighter color brown. So now that I have that selected, that color selected, I'm going to drag and drop it into that tree. Select 6B pencil, and I am just going to continue the outline of that tree up and then color fill it in. Okay. And then for my next tree, it'll be the third one. So it'll be behind this layer. Click the plus sign. I'm going to jump to this much darker brown here. So again, not completely black, but a little bit darker. And it's going to be in the background here. So still have my 6B pencil. This one, I'm going to see the top of it. So I'm going to draw down to the side and then have that point right there. And then add some branches And color fill. Continue filling and do the color, color drop. There we go. And I come back in with my pencil, just like with our first one, you can't see that, that difference between where the tree is and where the limbs start. Okay, and then there is one more tree way in the back. So add a new layer. And for this one, I am going to select complete black for my tree. Still on 6B pencil. Kind of the same idea that I did with this tree. And this is just adding in a different look to the background. A lot of this is going to be covered by our owl, but it does make it look more like a forest scene that you would see an owl living in. Okay, and then go back in and color where those two meet and make this a little darker, a little wider down here at the bottom. All right, so there are my trees. Now I'm going to change the background color and add in my stars and moonlight. Before I change my background color, I'm going to, just like I did with my owl, I'm going to group my tree layers together just to keep this somewhat organized. So click on that top layer, swipe to the right on all of the ones below it for the tree, and click group. So now I can come into my background layer. I'm going to change it to a really dark navy blue. And in my layers, I'm going to, below my tree group and my owl group, I'm going to add a new layer. Change my brush to the soft brush. And I'm going to select the blue that I have for my background and then bring it up so that it's a very light colored blue. I'm going to bump my brush size up. Now, because this is moonlight being like filtered through my trees, it doesn't have to be a perfect shape. You're just kind of lightly drawing in blobs around, because again, being filtered through the trees doesn't mean it's going to be the same everywhere. You're going to see it a little lighter in some areas and a little darker in others. So next I'm going to add in my stars. So in my brush library, I'm going to come down to the Luminance brush set, and I'm going to select the Glimmer 1. I'm going to change this all the way up to 100. I'm going to have the opacity set at 100 as well. And I am just going to start by tapping on my screen just to add in stars kind of randomly. And then I'm going to come in and lower that brush size down to about 60. And again, do the same thing. Ooh, no. Lightly tapping to add a different size star in the background here. So now that our background is done, I'm going to come into my owl group, turn that group back on, and I'm going to move this owl, make sure I have the owl group selected. I'm going to move this owl down to where I want him sitting on the tree. Now, his tail needs to go behind this tree branch. So I'm going to come into this group. His tail is right here, layer 40. So in my tree group, I'm going to click and then swipe to the right on my clipping masks. I'm going to drag this layer out of my tree group and put it on top of the tail. So now my tail has gone behind the tree limb, but everything else has stayed the same. The last piece I'm going to add into my owl art is going to be texture. So I'm going to add an overlay on top of all of my layers. So in my layers, create a new layer, change the blending mode, go down until you find overlay. I'm going to leave the opacity all the way up just so I can build in and see what I like, and then I can turn the opacity down. In my brush library, I like to use the crayon right here and the oil pastel to build in a nice texture to it. So I'm actually going to change my color of my brush. I'm going to set it up to a gray, a light gray. I'm going to turn the opacity on the brush down to about 50, and I'm going to start with my crayon. I'm going to turn my brush size down to about 14, and then I am just going to brush on top of my art, so now you can see where it's coming through. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do a second overlay layer, but now I'm going to turn it into that, go back to that oil pastel. Same thing, I have the brush size set up. I'm going to brush in that texture as well. Now in my layers, I'm going to turn my opacity of these layers way down so I get the texture from it. So when I zoom in, I see the texture that I just added into some spots on my art, but it doesn't change the color that I have in my piece of art either. So I'm going to set the oil pastel at 50% opacity. And then that crayon, let's do 40.
Thank you so much for drawing with me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and click the bell so that you're notified when new videos are posted. Hope to see you soon.